The campsite wasn't on any map, but it was already set up when I got there. I'd been assigned to sweep a restricted section past the north boundary, an area closed off after a landslide the previous year. No public access, no permits issued, and definitely no overnight stays allowed. Still, dispatch flagged a faint fire glow picked up by a lookout just before dawn, so I was sent to check it out. I hiked in expecting to find a couple of lost campers, or maybe someone ignoring the closure signs. Instead, I found a fully arranged site tucked between two rock formations, like it had been there for days. Tent pitched tight, guy lines secured with proper knots, a fire pit ringed with stones that didn't come from the area. There was even a folding chair facing the trees, positioned like someone had been sitting there watching something. What made it worse was how clean everything looked. No trash, no scattered gear, no signs of panic or haste, just placed. Like a display. I called it in, gave coordinates, and waited for instructions. Dispatch told me to document and clear it out if no one returned within the hour. Standard procedure. I started with the tent. Zipper closed. I announced myself before opening it, just in case. No response. Inside was a sleeping bag, rolled halfway, and a small notebook placed right at the center. I picked it up. The pages were filled with entries, all dated over the past 4 days. Each one described the same thing: someone watching from the tree line. Always at a distance, always just out of reach. The handwriting was neat at first, then gradually became tighter, more cramped, like the writer was running out of space or patience. One line repeated over and over near the end: "It moves when I blink." I flipped back to the first page. The name written at the top didn't match any permits or missing persons reports I knew of. I radioed it in. Dispatch said they'd check the system. While I waited, I noticed something else. The fire pit was still warm. Not hot, but recently used. I knelt down and touched the ash, soft, undisturbed. No wind had blown through. That meant someone had been there not long ago. I stood up and scanned the area. Trees on all sides, dense but not impenetrable. Enough gaps for someone to watch without being seen. I called out again. Nothing answered. Then I heard a faint click behind me. Not loud, just enough to catch my attention. I turned slowly. The fold-in chair had shifted, just slightly. It was now angled more toward the tent than before. I was sure it hadn't been like that when I arrived. I walked over and checked the ground. No tracks, no impressions. The dirt was firm, dry. If someone had moved it, they hadn't left a trace. I stepped back and kept my eyes on it. While I reached for the radio. Static, no signal. I moved a few steps in different directions, trying to catch a bar. Nothing. That's when I noticed the trail leading into the campsite wasn't the one I came from. It was narrower, partially hidden, and it curved off behind the rocks. I hadn't seen it on the way in. I marked my position mentally and followed it a short distance, just enough to see where it led. About 20 yards in, I found a second fire pit. Smaller, colder, and around it were footprints. Not hiking boots, bare feet, multiple sets, all facing inward, like people had been standing in a circle. I counted at least 6 distinct impressions. I backed out of there slowly, keeping my eyes on the ground. When I returned to the main campsite, the tent was open. I stopped immediately. I knew I had zipped it shut after checking inside. The flap was now pulled back, and the notebook I'd placed inside was gone. I approached carefully, heart rate climbing. I looked inside again. Empty. Sleeping bag still there. Everything else untouched. Just the notebook missing. I stepped back and scanned the trees again. That same feeling crept in, like I was being observed from multiple angles. I called out, louder this time, identifying myself, stating the area was restricted. Still nothing. Then I heard footsteps. Light, quick, circling. Not one person, more than one. I turned in place, trying to track the sound, but it didn't stay in one direction. It moved, fast, then stopped, then moved again. I couldn't see anything, no movement, no figures, just trees, I reached for my sidearm without drawing it, just resting my hand there. The radio on my shoulder clicked once. Then a voice came through. Not dispatch. Not any unit I recognized. It said, "You weren't supposed to find this." Calm, flat. No distortion. I tried to respond, but the signal dropped again. I checked the battery. Full. No reason for it to fail. I started backing toward the trail I came in on, keeping my eyes forward. The chair shifted again, this time more noticeably. It turned to face me directly. I didn't wait. I turned and moved quickly, not quite running, but close. The path back felt longer than it should have been. Twists I didn't remember. Turns that didn't match how I came in. I checked my watch. The time hadn't changed. Still 6:12 a.m. That didn't make sense. I'd been there at least 30 minutes. I kept moving until I saw the boundary markers again. Yellow tape, warning signs, familiar, safe. I stepped past them and finally got a signal back on the radio. Dispatch came through immediately, asking for a status update. I gave a brief report, told them I found an unauthorized campsite and possible multiple individuals in the area. They asked for details. I hesitated, then said I'd explain when I got back. When I reached my vehicle, I noticed something on the windshield. A small piece of paper tucked under the wiper. I pulled it out. It was a page from the notebook. Same handwriting. Same ink. The line written across it was one I hadn't seen before. It watches the watchers. I looked around the lot. Empty. No vehicles. No movement. I got in and drove straight back to the station, filed the report, kept it grounded. Unauthorized campsite, unidentified individuals, possible trespassers using the restricted zone. They sent a team out later that day to clear it. When they got there, the campsite was gone. No tent, no fire pit, no chair, no trail, just untouched forest. They even checked the secondary path I'd described. Nothing there. No footprints. No signs of disturbance, like it had never existed. But here's the part I can't explain. When I got home that night, I emptied my pockets and found a small amount of ash in the fold of my jacket. Fine, gray, like from a fire pit. I don't remember touching anything that would have left it there, and mixed in with it was a tiny fragment of paper, burned at the edges, just enough left to read a few words. It said, "You blinked." The emergency call came in on a frequency we don't even use anymore. I was halfway through a routine patrol when the radio snapped to life with a sharp burst of static. Then a voice, Nail, strained, whispering like he didn't want to be heard, asking for help near mile marker 12 on the South Trail. The problem was, that channel had been decommissioned 2 years ago after a repeater failure. We don't monitor it. We don't route calls through it. And yet somehow, it came through loud and clear. I checked my main channel, dead quiet. I tried dispatch. No response. Just static again, like something was blocking the signal. I switched back to the old frequency. The voice was still there, repeating the same thing. "I'm hurt. I can't move. Please, someone respond." It looped every 20 seconds, identical each time, like a recording. But there were small differences in the background. Wind, maybe, or something brushing against the mic. I logged the time out of habit, even though I wasn't officially responding yet. 3:17 p.m. Clear skies, light wind, no storms in the forecast. Nothing that should have interfered with comms. I decided to check it out anyway. Mile marker 12 isn't far, but it's off the main path, down a narrower trail that cuts through denser forest. Fewer hikers go that way. Less visibility. As I drove closer, my radio briefly picked up my own voice calling in a status update I hadn't made yet. Same tone, same phrasing. It said I was en route to a false emergency and returning to base. I froze for a second, then grabbed the mic and corrected it, but the transmission cut out before I finished. That's when I started feeling like I wasn't the only one using my call sign. I parked near the trailhead and noticed something off immediately. There was a bike leaning against a tree, front wheels still spinning slowly. No lock, no bag. Just left there. I called out. Nothing. The forest felt too still, like sound wasn't carrying properly. I switched back to the old frequency. The voice had changed slightly. Same words, but now there was a pause in the middle, like the speaker was struggling to breathe. I'm hurt. I can't move. I followed the trail in, keeping my radio close. About 5 minutes in, I found a backpack lying in the middle of the path. Zipper open. Contents scattered just enough to look disturbed, not searched. There was a phone inside. Screen cracked, but still on. No signal. I checked the recent calls. The last one dialed was emergency services, but it never connected. Timestamp read 2:58 p.m. That didn't line up with the radio call. I kept moving. The trail narrowed further, branches hanging low, forcing me to duck and push through. That's when I heard something ahead. Not a voice this time, more like movement. Slow, uneven. I called out again, identified myself. Movement stopped. Then silence. I stepped forward carefully and found a man sitting against a tree, legs stretched out, one arm resting awkwardly at his side. He looked up at me but didn't say anything. His eyes were open, alert, but there was something off about the way he was holding himself. Too still. I asked if he'd made the call. He blinked once, then shook his head slightly. I told him I'd heard someone asking for help. He didn't respond. Just kept looking at me. I noticed his radio, not standard issue, older model, same frequency I'd been hearing. It was clipped to his belt, speaker still active. And that's when I heard the voice again, coming from his radio. Same message, same moop, but his lips weren't moving. I reached down and turned it off. The voice cut instantly. The man flinched, like I'd done something wrong. I asked him how long he'd been there. He hesitated, then said, "Not long," but his voice didn't match the one on the radio, not even close. I checked his leg, no visible injury, no blood, no swelling, nothing that would explain where he couldn't move. I asked him to stand. He didn't, just shook his head again. Then he said something that didn't sit right. "You already told me to stay here." I felt a shift in my chest when he said that. I told him I hadn't. He looked confused, then glanced past me, like he expected someone else to be there. I turned around. Nothing behind me. Just the trail. When I looked back, he was watching me more closely now. I asked him who told him to stay. He didn't answer, just pointed at my radio. I checked it, still on the old frequency, still silent. I tried to switch back to the main channel. It wouldn't change. The dial moved, but the frequency stayed locked. That's when the voice came back. Not from his radio this time, from mine. Same message, same loop, but now it ended differently. After the usual line, it added something new. "He's not alone." I stepped back without thinking. The man didn't react, just kept watching me. I scanned the area again, trees, shadows, no movement. But the feeling had changed, like something had shifted just out of view. I told him we needed to move, that I'd help him back to the trailhead. He didn't resist, but he didn't help either. Just let me pull him up, his weight heavier than it should have been. We started walking slowly, his arm over my shoulder. Every few steps, he'd glance behind us. I asked him what he was looking at. He said, "The other one." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to. We reached the spot where I'd found the backpack. It was gone, completely gone. The ground looked untouched, no sign it had ever been there. I stopped, confused, then checked the time. 3:42 p.m. That didn't make sense. We hadn't been walking that long. I picked up the pace. The man stumbled slightly, then steadied himself. As we got closer to the trailhead, I saw my vehicle. Same position, same angle, but the driver's door was open. I was sure I'd closed it. I helped the man to the passenger side and sat him down. He looked exhausted now, breathing heavier. I went around to the driver's side and froze. The radio inside the vehicle was already on, tuned to the old frequency. and the voice was playing again. But this time, it wasn't a loop. It was a live transmission, and it was me. Clear, calm, saying I'd located the injured hiker and was returning to base. I hadn't said that. Not yet. I grabbed the mic and tried to interrupt, but nothing went through. The transmission continued, then ended with a phrase I hadn't heard before. Situation resolved. I turned back to the passenger seat. The man was gone. Door still closed. No sound of movement. No footsteps. Just empty space where he'd been sitting. I checked the ground. No tracks. No disturbance. Nothing. I stood there for a while, trying to process it, then got in the vehicle and drove back to the station. When I arrived, dispatch greeted me like everything was normal. Said they'd received my earlier transmission and were glad the situation was handled. I told them I hadn't made that call. They checked the logs. It was there, time-stamped at 3:39 p.m. My voice, my call sign, everything accurate. I filed a report, but kept it simple. Equipment malfunction. Possible prank transmission. No injured party found. The usual way we write things we can't explain. But here's the part that still bothers me. A week later, maintenance pulled the old repeater logs. That frequency hadn't been active in over 2 years. No power. No signal. No way for anything to come through. And yet, buried in the system, there was a single recorded transmission from that day. Just one. Time-stamped at 3:17 p.m. The very first call I heard. They played it back for me. Same voice. Same message. But at the very end, after the usual line, there was something else. A second voice. Quieter. Almost overlapping. And it said, "He found you first." The radio crackled and called my name before I ever checked in for the shift. I remember staring at it for a second, thinking maybe dispatch was running a test. But then it said my name again, clear as day, followed by my badge number, and I hadn't even signed the logbook yet. I picked it up and answered, told them I was just arriving, and there was a pause on the other end, the kind that feels too long, like someone covering a mistake. Dispatch came back confused, said I'd already checked in 20 minutes ago, and confirmed I was heading to the West Ridge Trail. I told him that wasn't possible because I'd just pulled into the lot. I even looked at the clock on my dash to be sure. 5:42 a.m., same as always, same routine, same shift, but something was already off. I stepped into the station, and the first thing I noticed was the logbook. My name was already there, signed, time-stamped at 5:19 a.m. The handwriting looked like mine, but tighter, like someone trying too hard to copy it. I ran my finger over the ink, half expecting it to smear, but it was dry. Completely dry. I checked the previous entries, nothing unusual. Same rotating names, same early morning check-ins. No jokes, no weird notes, just that one entry that didn't belong. I asked the overnight ranger if anyone had come through early. He said no, he'd been alone since midnight. I showed him the logbook. He stared at it for a while, then just shook his head and said, "Maybe, I forgot I'd come in earlier," which didn't make sense because I lived 40 minutes away and hadn't left my place until 5. Still, I signed under it anyway. Same name, same pen, same day. It felt wrong doing it, like I was confirming something I didn't understand. Dispatch called again, asked why I hadn't reached the ridge yet. I told them I wasn't even in the truck. Another pause. Then they said they had a call from a hiker about a ranger already up there. Said the guy looked like me but wasn't responding when spoken to. That's when I stopped thinking it was a mistake. I grabbed my gear, checked my radio battery twice, and headed out. The West Ridge Trail isn't heavily used, especially that early. Narrow path, dense tree cover, a couple blind turns where the forest feels too quiet. I drove up to the access point and saw a vehicle already parked there. It wasn't one of ours. Older model pickup, faded blue, no plates. Driver's side door slightly open, engine cold. I checked inside. Empty. There was a thermos in the cup holder, still warm. That detail stuck with me more than anything. Whoever owned that truck hadn't been gone long. I radioed it in, gave the description, then started up the trail. About 10 minutes in, I found footprints that didn't match standard hiking boots. Smooth soles, like work shoes. They went off the trail, then came back, then crossed over again. Like whoever made them didn't know where they were going, or was trying not to be followed. I kept moving. The radio stayed quiet for a while, which somehow made it worse. Then it came back on. Static first, then my voice. Not exactly my voice, but close enough to make my chest tighten. It said, "I'm already here." I stopped walking. Tried to call dispatch, but the signal cut out mid-transmission, just bursts of static and fragments of sound. I kept hearing that same phrase loop back through, "I'm already here." I moved faster after that. The trail narrowed near the ridge, with a drop-off on one side and dense brush on the other. That's where I saw him, standing about 30 yards ahead. Same uniform, same hat, same posture. He wasn't moving, just facing away from me, looking out over the ridge. I called out, no response. I took a few steps closer, still nothing. And he tilted his head slightly, like he heard something behind him, but didn't turn around. That small movement was enough to make me stop again. Something about it felt wrong, too slow, too deliberate. I reached for the radio again, but before I could speak, it crackled and said, "Do not approach." That wasn't my voice this time. It was dispatch. Clear, urgent. I froze, looked back up, and he was gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement. Just empty trail where he'd been standing. I moved forward cautiously, scanning the area. No footprints. No sign he'd ever been there, except I knew what I saw. At the edge of the ridge, I found a ranger badge. Mine. Same serial number. Same scratches near the clasp from when I dropped it last winter. I checked my chest. Mine was still there. I picked it up anyway. It felt warm, like it had been in someone's hand. That's when I heard something in the brush behind me. Not footsteps, more like fabric brushing against branches. I turned quickly, but saw nothing. Just dense trees and shadows. I called out again. Nothing answered. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the ridge, then turned and headed back down the trail. The footprints I'd followed earlier were gone, completely gone, like the ground had reset itself. I reached the truck and found the driver's door now closed. I was sure it had been open. I checked inside again. The thermos was gone. I radioed dispatch, told them I was returning to the station. They didn't argue. Just told me to come back and file a report. When I got there, the logbook was open to my entry, both entries, but the first one was gone. Just blank space where it had been. I asked the overnight ranger again if anyone had come in early. He looked confused, said I was the first one he'd seen all morning. I showed him the page. He said there was only one signature, mine, time-stamped at 5:42 a.m., same as when I walked in. I didn't argue, just wrote up the book. Report as best I could. Left out the part about seeing myself. Kept it simple. Unidentified individual, abandoned vehicle, radio interference, the kind of thing that gets filed and forgotten. But here's what still bothers me. Later that week, I got a call from a hiker who had been on the ridge that morning. Said he saw a ranger standing at the edge, not moving, not responding. He described the uniform perfectly, even mentioned the scratch on the badge. Then he said something I haven't been able to shake. He said when he got closer, the ranger turned around slightly, just enough for him to see the side of his face, and that's when he realized something was wrong. Not because it didn't look human, but because it looked exactly like someone he'd passed on the trail earlier, heading the opposite direction. Same face, same expression, just wrong timing. I checked the patrol logs for that day again. Everything was normal. No extra entries, no missing time, no record of that vehicle ever being towed. It never showed up in any report. But every now and then, when I sign in for an early shift, I still check the logbook before I write my name, just to make sure it isn't already there. And once, about a month after that incident, I found a faint indentation on the page, like something had been written and erased, right where my name should have been. And the radio, sitting quiet on the desk, let out a short burst of static, followed by a voice that sounded just enough like mine to make me stop. And it said, "You're running late."